Welcome back to this series on Adam Smith's theory of value. So far, we've discussed Adam Smith's labor-embodied theory of value. The labor-embodied theory, although important, is not the only theory offered in The Wealth of Nations. Smith also provides two other theories of value, the adding up and labor-commanded theories. In this episode, we'll discuss the adding up theory, and in the next one, we're going to discuss the labor-commanded theory. Having made his case for his labor-embodied theory of value in the earlier part of The Wealth of Nations, Smith switches his position later in the book. He claims that, quote, the quantity of labor commonly employed in acquiring or producing any commodity only determines a commodity's value in that early and rude state in which the whole produce of labor belongs to the laborer. What he's saying here is, once private property has emerged and class divisions have taken place, laborers must subsequently give a proportion of their produce to capitalists and landlords. And Smith argues that under these conditions, the labor-embodied theory may no longer hold. He substitutes it for what might be called an adding up theory of value. In Smith's adding up theory, quote, wages, profits, and rent are the three original sources of exchangeable value. This theory of value considers the profits of capital and the rents of land to come from value-creating elements in capital and land that are not reducible to labor. By breaking down a commodity's price into the three distributive shares paid out as a result of its sale, the adding up theory may very well be used as some aspect of bookkeeping. However, as a theory of relative prices, it's a somewhat circular theory. In pointing to the value of wages, profits, and rent as the determinants of value, Smith's adding up theory does not explain the cause of value. It only begs the question. To say that components of value determine value as such is an empty account of where relative prices come from. The adding up theory is not really a theory of value at all, but an accounting identity stating that the prices of all commodities are decomposable into wages, rents, and profits. The circular reasoning of Smith's adding up theory of value becomes particularly evident when it comes to his discussion of rents. As Duncan Foley has noted in his History of Economic Thought, Smith regards rents as a residual determined by the level of prices, not a determinant of price. Further problems with the adding up theory become evident when assessing its implications for the interrelation of commodity prices between sectors. It follows from the adding up theory that an increase in the price of a commodity for the sake of greater profits will increase that commodity's value. And this can't be the case generally. Insofar as commodities of an economy are inputs into each other, an increase in the price of a commodity will generally cause a concomitant increase in the price of other commodities to which it is an input. If a producer decides to increase the price of a commodity to raise its rate of profit, any sectors which use that producer's commodity as an input will find themselves with more costly inputs. If a producer decides to increase the price of a commodity to raise its rate of profit, any sectors which use that producer's commodity as an input will find themselves with more costly inputs. The producer facing more costly inputs will be forced to raise the price of its outputs to compensate, driving the general rate of profit back down towards its prior level. I'd like to illustrate this point with an example. I'll be using some visual aids in the form of tables to get my point across, so if you can look at the video version of this episode, it might be helpful. Consider an economy in which there are two firms or two sectors. One produces corn and the other produces iron. Each producer uses the other's outputs as inputs. The iron sector uses 1 unit of corn to produce 2 units of iron, while the corn sector uses 1 unit of iron to produce 2 units of corn. They purchase goods from each other at the end of every production period. In period 1, suppose that each firm brings 1 unit of their product to market for the price of $1. In this situation, the total inputs of each firm cost $1, and the net profit of each is also $1. A profit rate of 100%. In period 2, the corn-producing firm may choose to raise the price of corn to $2 in an attempt to increase its rate of profit. The iron-producing firm, which purchased its corn inputs at the end of period 1, does not yet factor the higher price of iron into its calculations. The two sectors purchase goods from each other at the end of period 2. 1 unit of corn is sold to the iron-producing firm for $2, and 1 unit of iron is sold to the corn-producing firm for $1. Because of the higher unit price of corn, the corn industry yields a higher rate of profit than in its previous period. Despite only paying $1 for iron inputs at the end of period 1, it sells its output, which is 2 units of corn, for $2 each. The corn-producing firm yields a net profit of $3, which provides it with a 300% rate of profit. But this success can't last. At the end of period 2, the iron-producing firm purchases a unit of corn at $2 per unit. The projections of the iron firm start to look pretty bleak. For the previous 2 periods, the firm would yield 100% profit on an iron sold for $1 per unit. This is no longer possible, since the cost of the iron firm's inputs have gone from $1 to $2 with the increased price of corn. Iron sold at a price of $1 per unit is no longer enough to make a profit. Surely enough, the end of period 3 ends in disaster for the iron-producing firm. It's no longer profitable at the present prices. In order to regain profitability in the face of increasing corn prices, the iron-producing firm must act. It chooses to sell iron for a unit price of $2 at the end of period 4. Despite the high price of corn, selling iron for a higher price allows the iron industry to regain its profitability. Having purchased corn inputs for $2 at the end of period 3, it sells 2 units of iron for $2 each. The iron-producing firm generates a net profit of $2. Its profit rate in period 4 is 100%. By period 4, the corn-producing industry is still riding high. It purchased iron inputs for $1 at the end of period 3 and subsequently sells its 2 units of corn output for $2 each. Its net profit at the end of period 4 is still 300%. This high rate of profit will come crashing down in period 5. At the end of period 4, the corn-producing firm purchases its iron inputs for a new higher price of $2. Suddenly, it finds it can no longer maintain a 300% rate of profit. The chickens have come home to roost. Increased corn prices from period 2 have led to increased iron prices. Those increased iron prices have brought the exchange ratio of iron to corn back to what it was in period 1. More importantly, the rates of profit between firms have equalized, with iron inputs that cost a total of $2. The corn-producing firm selling its corn output for $2 per unit can only yield a 100% rate of profit. The rate of profit of the iron-producing firm, too, has returned to unity. This case illustrates why the adding up theory does not hold as a general principle. Increases in market price for the sake of spiking profitability do not affect value in exchange. In this episode, we've discussed the adding up theory of value and how it suffers from a problem of circular reasoning. In the next episode, we're going to discuss a third theory of value that Adam Smith puts forth in his Wealth of Nations. In addition to the labor embodied theory and the adding up theory, Smith also has a labor commanded theory in his Wealth of Nations. That's what we're going to discuss in the next video. If you're a graduate student or professor studying economics, particularly history of economic thought, and you have some interesting work you'd be willing to share with me, I'd like to speak with you. Please reach out to me by filling out the form linked in the description of this episode. If you're studying economics at the undergraduate or high school level and you're in need of a tutor, I may be able to help you. You can get in contact with me by filling out that same form. If you'd like more content like this, where I discuss various topics in the history of economic thought, please consider checking out my YouTube channel. I'll see you in the next episode.